Baby boy hunters, former business partner Devon Archer, convicted felon, testified behind closed doors to the House Oversight Committee yesterday as scheduled, finally.
And he made it there safely, Dan.
Yeah, he did not get knocked off on his way there. There were no Archduke Franz Ferdinand moment. And Jim Comer, chairman of that House Oversight Committee, had this to say about his testimony on Hannity's program last night.
Well, Devon Archer testified that they were influence peddling. We've wondered what the business was. I suspected it was influence peddling, but we heard today from someone on the inside, it was influence peddling. They sold Joe Biden. That's what the business was. And Joe Biden himself talked to every single person that has wired money to the Bidens. I mean, you've got a situation here where you look at those people who were wiring the money. A lot of those people aren't the most credible people in their countries. There are a lot of people who are in a lot of trouble in many of these countries who were sending wires to the Biden family. They needed help. They needed help from the government. That's why they paid the Biden family. They were influence peddling.
So what does that mean for the big guy?
But what this did today, in my opinion, is open the door. Did Joe Biden violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act? Because he was an active participant in at least one deal we know of with the Burisma deal. He was actively participating in doing a benefit to this foreign agent for this foreign country, and he was withholding American tax dollars in the form of foreign aid for that. I mean, this is very serious. Today took a huge step towards implicating Joe Biden.
But not according to the loyal opposition. That would be embodied by Representative Dan Goldman from New York, who, is a moron.
Well, he said they talked about the weather.
Doesn't that contradict the president's statement saying that he never talked to any of Hunter Biden business associates? Clearly he talked, whether it's about the weather or whatever, but he said specifically that he's never talked to them. Doesn't this contradict them?
I don't know what his comment is, and if we're going to... Well, I don't think that's what he said. He never said that he has never spoken to anyone. He said that he had nothing to do with Hunter Biden's business dealings. If he says hello to someone that he sees his son with, is he supposed to say, "Hi, son"? Oh, no, I'm not going to say hello to the other people at the table or the other people on the phone. It's kind of a preposterous premise to think that a father should not say hello to people that the son is at dinner with, and that is literally all the evidence is.
And Dan Goldman continued.
Why are you pointing the finger at other people all the time? Why don't you point the finger at yourself? Do a little more reading, maybe. Less time in court. Maybe that would be effective for you.
Pardon me for saying this, but you seem defensive.
I'm not being defensive. You're the one who's being defensive. Why is it always the other person who's being defensive? Have you ever asked yourself that? Why don't you ask yourself that?
It's a good question. I think Dan Goldman's comments should be accompanied by a laugh track, by the way. But see, the thing about that, the statement he made, which is untrue and an insult to your intelligence, is intended to be an insult to your intelligence.
Right.
It's intended to say, you think you're going to deliver a reckoning to one of ours?
You're not. Yeah, that's what he's saying.
We'll decide when Joe Biden is done, not you. And we'll say the most ridiculous thing, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's the attitude, which is why you get such absurd statements. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Julie Kelly. Her Substack is Declassified with Julie Kelly. She's the author of January 6th, How Democrats Used the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. And she reminds us in a recent piece that Jack Smith, this is a name that has a history with the Bidens, or could have, but chose not to pay attention to all that was going on back in, well, we know going back at least 20 years, maybe longer. Julie Kelly, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Thanks for having me on in that great clip of Martin Short.
That was Martin Short? I thought that was right. Dan Goldman. Nathan Thurm. It's a classic. So what do we know about Jack Smith, his previous iteration before, one of his previous iterations professionally before he was anointed special.
Of 2015. So as the Biden family crime racket was putting all of its players together, including international quote-unquote businessmen in Ukraine and China, in Romania, and even Russia, Jack Smith was in charge of this powerful unit that is supposed to root out, investigate, and prosecute public corruption cases. So instead of paying attention to Hunter Biden and Devon Archer and Chris Hines, remember the stepson of then Senator John Kerry and then Secretary of State, so they are the ones who had Rosemont Seneca, this outfit that was sweeping up millions of dollars around the world. Instead of paying attention to that and, say, the 70 or so odd trips that Hunter Biden took with his father, the big guy, on Air Force Two, including 6 trips to China, Jack Smith, who we're told is the most eagle-eyed, fair-minded, apolitical federal prosecutor since, Robert Mueller, ignored all of this, which was resulting in major headlines in the summer of 2014. Instead, he was focused on, the governor of Virginia and his wife maybe taking gifts that they shouldn't have and unsuccessfully prosecuting Democratic Senator John Edwards. So Jack Smith now already indicted Donald Trump twice for mishandling classified documents allegedly, and now is going to probably hand down another criminal indictment on another matter today. But no questions for Jack Smith's office about why he ignored what the Biden family was doing as he was head of this unit for almost 4 years.
So I'm sure Jack Smith knew what was going on, but don't you think President Obama at the time knew what was going on?
There's no doubt he had to have known. And, of course, he's the one who put Joe Biden in charge of Ukraine. And, it's important, too, to remember. So people are saying, Joe Biden had nothing to do with this. If Hunter Biden, a few months after being kicked out of the Navy for failing a drug test, just suddenly became an international energy expert and learned the Ukrainian language and was going to be so valuable. What happened in April 2014 when Zopchevsky, who is the head of Burisma, put Hunter Biden and Devon Archer on the quote-unquote board, $23 million in Burisma assets had been frozen in the UK, and the UK was going to conduct an investigation into money laundering because Zopchevsky was close with the former president of Ukraine who had just been thrown out of office in this revolution. So they were going to conduct an investigation. The EU was going to conduct an investigation. Of course, Ukraine was already going to conduct an investigation. So what happens when they hire Hunter Biden, Devon Archer, his business partner, tied to Chris Hines, the then stepson of the Secretary of State, John Kerry? Suddenly a judge throws that case out of court. The $23 million is unfrozen, and all these investigations into Burisma go away. Of course, then we know what happened after that is that Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in military assistance and U.S. aid if they didn't fire Viktor Shokin, the Ukrainian prosecutor who's still hot on the heels of Burisma.
And what do you make of, and if you have any more color on this than what we already know, of the FBI asset that was inside that universe in Ukraine and seemed to, I wouldn't say substantiate, but certainly claimed that the Zolochevsky, the Ukrainian oligarch, head of Burisma, paid both the big guy and Hunter $5 million in transactions that you'll never be able to trace. What are we to make of that, or is that just going to be pending whatever the House Oversight Committee is able to come up with?
I mean, I think that will be a big part of validating this notion that we all know that Hunter Biden was leveraging not just his father's last name, but direct access to his father as vice president and then former vice president to influence American policy. What Burisma was doing not only to get out from under these international investigations and freeze assets that had been withheld was also to get a foothold in U.S. energy policy, and that is what that FBI form really detailed, is that they were trying to find U.S. energy company that they could also purchase and get a foothold here. So the fact that at the time they're working with this corrupt country. We know that Ukraine is like just a money laundering operation for, of course, our national security apparatus and those around the world. Is a very unstable country taking advantage eagerly of an also unstable young man, Hunter Biden, and his father, who was, trying to enrich himself and sweep up millions of dollars to live the lifestyle that so many in Washington, D.C. do, and he didn't, but now he does.
Well,
so.
and of course Obama knew, and that whole power structure that's still in place, and the Biden administration knew because they were asked about it. I mean, they were asked about it in the campaign in 2008. They were asked about it later in the administration when he got the appointment to Burisma. Jay Carney was asked about it. Matt Lee asked Jen Psaki about it. Matt Lee from Associated Press. So, I mean, they were asked about it. It's not credible to think that they didn't have any conversations about what Joe and Hunter and Biden Incorporated is doing and how we're going to handle it and what we're going to say and what we're going to have our flacks that are public facing say to the press. Of course they discussed it.
They absolutely did, and I thank you for bringing that up. I articulate those questions in my piece on my Substack, is that the White House was under fire. The State Department, Jen Psaki was the spokeswoman at that point, they were getting direct questions about Hunter Biden's new role as a board member. There were headlines everywhere, from the Wall Street Journal to the Washington Post. I mean, this was heavily covered in May of 2014, which again, why Jack Smith wasn't paying attention to it. But also, there's no way that Barack Obama and the Oval Office did not understand what was going on here. And so, of course, and you know this too, Dan and Amy, there have been articles for years, I mean, major articles in the New Yorker and the New York Times, and, before the election of 2020 about Hunter Biden's problems and then, this overseas grip that he had going while he was traveling with his father at taxpayers' expense. And look, this was also confirmed in the plea documents that we saw last week. Hunter Biden's own attorneys confirmed that he was getting money from the Chinese, that he was getting money from Ukraine, he was getting money from Romania. So it's not a fabrication of James Comer or anyone else in Republicans in the House. This has been now confirmed by his own attorneys in that sweetheart plea deal that we learned about last week.
The other thing you write about, interestingly, you're talking about the possibility that Trump could be indicted again related to January 6th by Jack Smith as soon as today. The idea that Jack Smith would move for pre-trial detention of the former president post-indictment, well, that would be a moment. That would really be something.
No way.
What's the theory behind that?
I know people are skeptical, but look, I've covered this D.C. federal courthouse, these prosecutors, and more importantly, these judges for over 2 years. You cannot put anything past Jack Smith or this DOJ, and D.C. judges of both parties, by the way, act as nothing more than a rubber stamp. But there is precedent now. I talk about a key ruling by Beryl Howell, the then chief judge, Obama appointee, who handed down basically special no-bail rules for January 6th defendants. Aside from that ruling, there is precedent to deny bail for defendants, nonviolent defendants, being charged, for example, obstruction of an official proceeding, which is probably my guess, the first felony count that Jack Smith will hand down against Donald Trump. I'm not saying it's inevitable. I'm saying that it's possible, and people should prepare for it. Because, look, the Biden regime and the Democrats have created this bloodlust on the left and the Democratic Party base that will only be satisfied not with Donald Trump in handcuffs, but him behind bars. These trials are not going to proceed before the November 2024 election.
Right.
Even if he's convicted, he won't be sentenced. They want, and they've created an expectation that they're going to see Donald Trump behind bars, and this is one way to get it, and it will be easy to do in that D.C. federal courthouse.
Just when you think,
imagine?
Just when you think the Democrats can't do a bigger solid to Donald Trump with respect to his electoral interests, hold him pre-trial detention.
Well, that's what Biden wants. I mean, Biden's trying to keep his son out of jail and put Trump in jail.
Yeah, well, every Republican primary opponent might as well suspend their campaigns if that happens. Oh, my goodness. That would be something. Julie Kelly, Substack, her Substack, Declassified with Julie Kelly. She's the author of the book January 6th, How Democrats Used the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. Julie, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
There are more than 50 million people enslaved in the world today.
Most of them are women and children.
They lock you in cellars or in rooms with no windows. 95% of girls that are born in the brothels remain trapped in the brothels for the rest of their lives.
SOS International is working to make freedom possible.